President Trump Tuesday visited the battleground state of Pennsylvania to tour a new petrochemicals plant. Speaking before thousands of workers, the president promised the factory would help rebuild the struggling economy of Beaver County, an area hard hit by the collapse of the steel industry and home to voters who helped him win back the White House in 2016.
We're never going to stop winning, because nobody's ever won like what's happened over the last couple of years. Nobody's ever won like you're winning. I've more than fulfilled my promises. Even they said he promised things that he actually produced more than he promised. That's true. But we're going to produce more and more. I just want to thank everybody. With your help, factory floors across this land are once more crackling with life. Our steel mills are fired up and blazing bright. The assembly lines are roaring. Industry is booming. And the hearts of our workers, the American spirit, is soaring higher, stronger, freer, and greater than ever before.
And John Micek is editor-in-chief of the Pennsylvania Capital Star. He joins me now from Harrisburg. John, welcome. Thanks for being with us. So let's start with the politics. In the 2016 election, President Trump won in Beaver County by 18 percentage points. So what do we know about the voters in this area, and why is the president trying to shore up support here?
Sure. Tanya, for a long time, Beaver County was a Democratic stronghold, very pro-union, very working class, the kind of blue-collar voters who were so-called Trump triers in 2016. There's been a steady shift. The Pittsburgh suburbs have become a lot more blue in the intervening 2 years. A redrawn congressional map in 2018 led to the election of Democratic Congressman Connor Lamb, a classic blue dog Democrat, a former federal prosecutor, a former Marine, very pro-Second Amendment. He has good ties to labor. He's very much a good fit for that district. He is the kind of candidate that Democrats are hoping will reach out to those voters. And they did, he did resonate with them. And as a consequence, this is a district or county rather that Donald Trump carried by 18 points in 2016, and he does need to hold on to it.
So, looking then at the competition, you have some reporting on fundraising numbers from some of the Democratic presidential candidates, specifically in Pennsylvania. So how does President Trump stack up against the former Vice President Joe Biden, who has deep ties in the state?
The president got skunked. There's no two ways to put it. Joe Biden raised $937 from Pennsylvania donors through the first 6 months of the year. President Trump raised about $487,000 during that same time period. The president's approval ratings are at 37% among registered voters in a recent Franklin and Marshall College poll. It's important to note, Tanya, that's the same level that President Barack Obama was at in his first term, but Donald Trump is not Barack Obama, and his numbers have remained mired there throughout the first 2.5 years of his presidency.
So Biden is still popular.
Absolutely. Again, a deep well of support, deep ties to the Democratic establishment in Pennsylvania. When you go through his campaign finance reports, you see a lot of sort of the big dollar Democratic donors who have traditionally given Democratic campaigns, who supported Hillary Clinton in 2016. The former vice president is from the Scranton area, as he will say every single time he has an opportunity to do so when he comes to Pennsylvania. And this is a state where he kicked off his campaign. His campaign headquarters is in Philadelphia. He has made winning back the Rust Belt states like Pennsylvania, like Wisconsin, like Michigan, that Donald Trump won in 2016, part of the cornerstone of his campaign for 2020.
But does he have a strategy for bringing economic prosperity back to this area that doesn't involve, petrochemical plants per se?
You hear the former vice president talk about these things, and he does talk about sort of the Rust Belt voters. He does talk about reaching out to working class voters. But in a lot of ways, Pittsburgh has moved past that legacy. And that's something that Donald Trump, I think, harps on kind of to his peril. Pittsburgh now has a vibrant eds and meds sector. There's biotech there. There's computers there fired by institutions of higher learning like Carnegie Mellon University. So it's a very different place. And I think perhaps Biden understands that, and perhaps Elizabeth Warren and Pete Buttigieg understand that. But that's something that Biden, I think, is going to have to harp on a lot more. It's not as convenient a box as I think those two men would like to make it.
Very interesting points you've got there. Now, so I want to go back to this petrochemical plant, though. It does come at a time when the world seems to be turning away from single-use plastics, but this plant is expected to produce more than 1 million tons of plastic every year. So what are some of the major arguments environmentalists are making against the petrochemicals complex, and how is that seen there in Pennsylvania?
I mean, in a word, it's a polluter. The study that was showing that it's going to give off volatile organic compounds, which are cancer-causing, they're unhealthy in the air. Western Pennsylvania already has a huge air quality problem, and this plant is expected to contribute to that. And you do correctly point out there's a lot of agitation among progressive Democrats to move away from fossil fuels, to move towards renewables like wind and solar. And in a lot of ways, this plant represents doubling down on fossil fuels. It's expected to be awarded about $1.6 billion in tax relief over the next 25 years, and that's not insignificant.
No, absolutely. So what can be argued then in Shell's defense? Is this plant much needed in this area of the country, or is that sort of a false argument because you could say you could take those jobs and put them towards sort of green manufacturing?
There's certainly that argument to be made. There's about 2,500 construction jobs that are be coming from the cracker plant, so-called cracker plant, about 600 permanent positions when all is said and done, which is not a lot. But for Monaco, which particularly took it on the chin with the collapse of the steel industry, every job helps. When I first moved to Pennsylvania about 20 years ago, I covered that part of the state and saw some of that distress firsthand. But certainly there's an argument to be made to move into longer-lasting renewables and more far-reaching technologies.
All right, John Micek, thank you so much for sharing your insight into Pennsylvania with us.
Anytime.